Welcome back to Hearthstone Grandmasters. We've got another match for you coming right up, and it's been what was a very quick 3-0 sweep a day. But then that last series, honestly, I do almost want to go over the whole thing once more. Even though the previous two games, the Bomb Warrior did a good job, but that last game, I think, is going to go down as one people are going to remember for quite a while. Viper versus Jarla is going to be coming up though, and again we see that Warlock banned once more by Jarla. Jarla have his warrior banned out, so we're going to have just this rematch once more.
Yes, and if you missed it earlier, this was a relatively quick and straightforward 3-0 sweep by Viper on his Weapon Rogue when they met in the opening game of the day, I believe, or the opening match of the day, which Viper will certainly be hoping to replicate here, but Jarla has stuck to the same ban strategy, not only from the opening match that I was just talking about, but also from their previous encounter in Swiss as well. It's the only time Viper has had his Warlock banned is when he's been playing against Jarla, and that's now happened 3 times out of 3 occasions that they've met, both in the qualifying Swiss and now in the live broadcast portion as well.
Yeah, and it looks like we're not going to get a direct repeat from earlier on. It looks like Viper's going for that Druid to kick things off with and not starting on the same deck as he did last time. I know, talking about mind games and stuff like that, we do it a lot, but I do wonder what the thought pattern is of starting, same opponent, same band, starting on Rogue one time, starting on Druid the next, and maybe it is just mixing it up a little bit and maybe not being too predictable.
Yeah, I think you asked the question at an unfortunate point last time, but Last Hero Standing definitely does have more scope, I think, to actually talk about queue order and it actually mattering. Particularly when mind games can come into play a little bit when you've already encountered someone and a certain thing happened, and maybe you can notice a trend that someone is leading with one deck like 75% of the time or whatever. Again, if everyone just decides to random.org, it gets a bit messy, but I think there's less merit in doing so in Last Hero Standing when you're actually constructing a lineup that is often designed to be played in a particular order with queues and counter queues and so on. So yeah, I certainly do think it's a more interesting discussion in Last Hero Standing than it is in Conquest overall.
Yeah, and from here, Jarla looks like he's going to go for his Mage. So we might be seeing just this Druid Mage kicking it off in game number 1. And, we could be on the road to sweep because both these decks do have the potential. RDU 3-0'd with his Mage earlier in the day, and it just takes 3 good ramp draws from Druid to really get cooking too. So pretty exciting to go into this one. Again, just the straight warrior band, which I think from Viper's lineup makes sense, especially with that Warlock as well. Because although although he's probably assuming the Warlock gets banned out, the Warrior has the tools, right? Although there's the turbo weapon, there is still a lot of removal. And like you said, if you pop off with the Warlock once or twice, but then it just gets cleaned up by hard removal, then you start to just run out of stuff to do. So it does make sense across the board.
And also, by the time they've just played Wrench Caliber and hit you with it, and the 15 damage you've done to yourself, you draw one bomb and you're dead. The game's just over.
That is true. I do think a lot on the line here for these players wanting to bag as many points as possible. Of course, this is week 2 of 3 weeks of Swiss. So after next week, that's it. The players get placed in their divisions, and for Jarla as well, just that extra little bit of spice that's available of if he can then go into Sunday and then get a win, that just cements his quickly building legacy even further. Just does need those wins. Let's go into our game number 1. Viper on top on the Druid. Jarla on this Mage, but with wild growth. And I was just going to ask you, Saul, the double nature studies, what are your opinions on the keeps there? Because I was even looking at keeping both nature studies.
I like this double keep. Just the 1 studies and the growth, just because it's a curve. It's 1 into 2, right? Like you play studies, you take a spell that you're not going to play, you play growth on 2. And then at that point, if you draw overgrowth, if you draw guardian animals, the second nature studies doesn't help you ramp out that second thing quite as much. Like if you draw overgrowth, for example, once you've played the wild growth, you can just play the overgrowth naturally anyway. So I think it's one of the things that you do have to pay attention to in mulligans with this deck is that nature studies is actually weirdly a ramp card, and you don't it doesn't necessarily become obvious that it is. But with certain curves, it can accelerate your mana gain quicker than it would otherwise.
Yeah, we are going to see it pay off here. Overflow, not normally the craziest payoff turn for some early game ramp, but the fact that it can just set up the following turns is going to be pretty huge. But for Jarla, the Apprentice is there, the Cyclone's there, and now there's some card draw for next turn. So we're looking at him actually pretty aggressive potentially in the mid game as well, going into those turns maybe 4 or 5.
Yep. So we're just seeing Arcane Intellect this turn, try and find some more juice. Get yourself hold of a Devolving Missiles, Rare Frost, something to help you pop off with this Sorcerer's turn.
Oh, that's a lot of beasts in hand for Viper.
It is.
He does not want to be looking at these.
No.
Does he ever just coin one out? Is that what his curve's telling him right now?
Kind of is, right?
What to do?
You play 3 5-drops this turn, next turn, and the turn after, potentially, and then you have overflow. Kind of looks that way to me. He is down to single Teacher's Pet, single Twilight Runner remaining in his deck in terms of beasts, and still 2 Guardian Animals remaining in there that are very quickly losing value.
Yep. Jarla has a ton of options. He can go slightly slower if he wants to. He could just play the Firebrand and a Brain Freeze. It's a little bit inefficient, but it does kind of do the job.
It does. I generally don't like interacting with Teacher's Pet like that, especially with Mage. It's like, it feels like if you can't clear the second half, it's kind of pointless.
Right.
The second half is often not really that much smaller. Sometimes it's bigger. It ends up as a muckluck. But, you know, there's 3/4s that can come out. There's 1/2s that summon 4/4s. There's 5/5s that can come out with it. So just popping it open without a plan to deal with the drop, I generally like to avoid.
And Viper, shake of the head. Oh, look, another beast.
Yep.
This is just not what he's after. But also, just, you know, reviewing Jarla's hand here, he has a lot of payoff, but he doesn't actually have access to a ton of spells yet. So Jarla's maybe not going off as quickly as I thought he would going into turns 5 or 6. So this is probably a little bit better for Viper than he thinks it is. I'm not saying it's good, but it's probably just a bit better. He's really feeling right now.
The Firebrand Twilight Runner interaction, of course, key to this matchup. You've been playing any Hearthstone this expansion. I'm sure you've seen this come up once or twice already, but that's where that Teacher's Pet is kind of playing spoiler, and I think it's the reason, really, why Viper chose to go in this order, is that he didn't just want to get straight up blown out by the immediate Firebrand if he'd led with the Twilight Runner.
You fight me, you get burned.
And the funny thing with these plays from Jarla the past couple of turns is, although, you know, I'm by no means saying the plays are bad, but by him using these spells, he's never gaining a lot of spells, right? So his hand is kind of staying at the 1 to 2 spell range, which is not really what he wants with what the rest of his got as a payoff. So it's kind of awkward, but on the other side of that, he has to do something, right? Like, he can't just pass because he doesn't have access to any spells.
Beautiful. Yep. Yep. The tilt completes. It always comes out whenever you draw beast into beast into beast into beast. It always then gives you the Guardian Animals as well, just to rub it in.
What to do?
Now Viper in the unfortunate position,
What to do?
pretty much just has to take a miserable turn of just swipe removal, or he's dropping minions into consolidated minions on the Mage side of the board, which is, as I mentioned earlier, exactly what they want you to do.
again, just another minion. Luckily, Jandis is going to be alright for Jarla. It's more or less a whole turn of solid play without having to utilize any spells. But this is a weird looking mage hand. You don't see this often, do you? Also, his Primordial Studies just doesn't get a spell either. It actually generates another minion, so... I think looking back, Jarla might have preferred a more tempo style of just playing Zoo style with this deck. At least in this game.
What makes something real?
Works against me.
Don't.
Which one do you bait?
Obviously. Alexander Baguli, the world's most predictable Hearthstone caster.
Predictably awesome. I also want to throw out there that is definitely not how you pronounce my second name, so let's not make that a thing.
It's
No,
Baguli.
it's not.
Yeah.
And suddenly, Viper is maybe not even suddenly, but Viper is pretty much just playing defensive Druid right now, right? He just needs to piece something together, and I'm not really sure the direction he goes from here, because he's used not too much removal, but this is a Druid with Malygos and Omu in it, but he's already used a swipe, he's already used some removal tools. I'm not sure how he wins the game. I guess Ysera is how he wins the game at this point, but that feels like a long way off right now.
It does, yeah. But step number one is getting himself a clear path to just be able to drop an overflow and get to some of the power cards in his deck, because he's not drawing them naturally. His guardian animals are exhausted. There is one Teacher's Pet, I think, remaining in his deck at this point for both of those guardian animals that he has in hand. So Viper needs to find himself a way to get a little bit of tempo, or at least a little bit of leeway, and find some hand space to be able to drop overflow here, which again, I think you see Rising Winds being played for Eagle as opposed to card draw. Viper's just trying to hand dump as best he can.
Right. Lab Partner looks like a pretty solid pickup here for Jarla. I think he might be at the point now where he should seriously consider just throwing everything he's got on the board.
It's starting to get to that point, isn't it?
Yeah. I think Viper's done a very good job of telling Jarla he has a terrible hand. Take the Ogre. Although the Archmage is playable, to be fair. Wait. I would have thought with that pick he would have just dropped the Archmage down.
Okay. We saw a very similar situation to this in APAC, where I believe it was Tiz did not play the second Mana Cyclone immediately. This is a little different because Jarla's hand is now already kind of full of evocation spells, which won't give him necessarily enough room for the Cyclone. And by committing the extra minions, he's kind of locked himself out of that. But now you end the turn with a very, very stranded-looking second Mana Cyclone in your hand.
Right. Yeah, honestly, for me, that turn went the complete opposite direction in every single way it could have gone from what I thought was going to happen.
Oh, really?
Well, I thought when he picked the Archmage with 5 mana left, he was just going to dump it, as a almost tempo plan and just say, okay, I'm just going to keep playing minions. And sometimes you've got to hope you draw a card draw or something good off the top.
So the two options that I saw that turn were to risk the Shenvala. So you play the Shenvala, you play your 2 spells that you had, and then you play your Cyclone to look for the 3rd spell to pop it off. Or a double Cyclone turn, where you just, play your spells, play the first Cyclone, play the cheap spells, hopefully that you get off the first Cyclone, play the second Cyclone. But yes, also, neither of those things necessarily happened.
The evocation does throw it off as well, right? Let's be honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
The evocation
absolutely.
really wildly changed the outcome of that turn. And you can't plan for it, because it's a very niche card. Or an outcome, should I say, not a niche card.
Viper want to buy one playable Hearthstone card.
Yeah, honestly, Viper, mate, I'm with you. Because this just does not look good, has it? He's just drawn just the complete worst order of his whole deck, outside of arguably what? The Wild Growth.
Yeah.
Long years I have
Zoification.
studied.
Not great, is it?
Shemvala Potion, let's go.
Mm-hmm. Wow, this evocation
Shemvala and
really sucks.
the 2/2 spells.
What does that do?
It wouldn't get him there, right?
No.
Hmm.
Thought Shemvala was Kael'thas, just keeps track of the 3 spells.
Yeah, it would have
throughout
been
the-
sick, wouldn't it? It would have been sick.
Yeah.
Jarla's took the potion once, all.
He did, yeah.
Wow, this is just horrible, isn't it? I'm
It's
trying to work out
miserable.
a combination of cards that even feels okay, and none of them do.
Yeah.
I do appreciate Jarla just going, well, when all else fails, let's throw a fireball at his face.
What I want to do is, you know how like everyone keeps talking about how like this expansion's like really power creepy and all the decks are new and all the old decks are unplayable and the cards are so much stronger now. I want to show them this game of Hearthstone and then see their reaction to like, wait, so these are like the insanely powerful, unbeatable decks that Scholomance has brought into the meta, right? These 2 decks that just do absolutely nothing for 10 turns.
Right.
I wonder.
Even its germination, I mean, I guess it's playable.
Technically playable, yes.
Is this ever desperate enough to ramp and then draw?
Jeez.
Right, but it's that or the late Thresher play, right? It's just the problem is with not knowing what this secret is it always just like, I'm gonna say safer to just try a ramp spell first and see what happens. Obviously, you won't be able to late Thresher and copy it if it is counterspell, but
You both have Rush, so you can take care of most of the spell damage this way. Got a chunk of information about what's going on with the secret, at least knows that it's not counterspell at this point, but the mirror entity is what it actually is going to be a problem for this deck at this point. There's no real way that Viper can defuse that happily.
And Shemvala coming down now to finish that quest is a nice little cute payoff there.
Yeah,
he can just fill his hand up with spells. A shame that he doesn't have now the Cyclone with all these extra spells in hand. But you know, you do what you got to do to get there.
Yeah, he had to play the Cyclone on the previous turn to get the proc this turn of the Elemental allies, though, which is why it was key. Like, you might say, well, hang on, if he knew he was going to draw 3 spells this turn, why wouldn't he hold on to the Cyclone? This was Elemental number 1 that he needed to play on the previous turn.
I wonder if there's any value to playing the Ice Barrier now, because you just saw your opponent kind of test the secret, and then you play another secret and make them have to consider it again. There's probably not too much payoff for it, but Viper would have to go back to the drawing board a little bit.
Yeah, the problem is just how much board presence you leave on the other side, though, right? If you just spend all of your mana remaining on just dropping the secret, the teacher's pets just pick you apart too effectively, I think.
Yeah, protecting the Shemvala does seem pretty good, right? Because it's a reasonable expectation, I think, that it does live another turn with these freezes.
Ghidra Swipe is pretty exciting, though. I can see it works out pretty well because I know this is Mirror Entity. Viper does not have that information. It could still be any number of things at this point. Spellbender, any of the face secrets.
Right, and the good thing is, the second he plays Ghidra, the information's unlocked, right? He doesn't have to. He doesn't have to preemptively commit to any of this. He can play Ghidra and go, okay, what's going on? Right, swipe target, done.
He just gets to Moonfire, double trade the important minions, And he finds himself suddenly miles ahead on board.
This does mean that I am 99% sure his Malygos is just one of the most dead cards he could get, because I think that's 2 swipes, 2 Moonfires, and a Fog Beam gone now.
Yes, the second of the Moonfires he used was... Excuse me, I sneezed in the middle of that sentence. The second Moonfire he used was generated, though.
Oh,
so
my mistake.
He has a natural
okay.
one left.
Yeah, okay. So not completely dead then, but the options are limited, because honestly, versus Mage, I do feel like you can just drop Malygos on the board and pass a lot of the time, as there aren't that many great answers to it. At this point, I imagine Jarla's just sat here going, is there any way how can I push the most damage phase this turn? Because this Pyroblast is just sitting there in his hand.
Dark Glare in Druid? Yep, sign me up.
Did Druid need more ramp?
Wait, is it
This
living?
is huge, though.
Is it living? It's living.
It also doesn't matter, right?
Kinda matters.
It's a free hero power
Yeah.
against a minion. It can't go phase.
You can Moonfire yourself in the face. Eh?
That was a Raven comment if I ever heard it. Yeah, so it means Viper has more mana to spend on his ramp spells.
Yes, exactly.
A really strong setup here for Jarla, because Viper has to pull something pretty magnificent out of the bag here to stop these giants and the dragon as well. But that Pyroblast, really, just one of these threats needs to be able to hit face, and could well just be game next turn.
What to do?
What a draw this was.
Waits for no one.
Maybe one of the worst.
His bottom 6 is, what? Second Overflow, Ysera Unleashed, Malygos, Omu. Second Anubisath Defender, second Moonfire. That's his bottom 6. So basically, like, 5 win conditions and a Moonfire in his bottom 6 cards.
The cards his deck is built around.
Yeah.
Nah, he's just going to be the concede. Jarla had that Pyroblast available, but honestly, the setup of the double giants whilst being able to freeze the minions out was pretty huge there. And Jarla takes that game number 1, which means Druid is long gone for Viper now. And honestly, with that draw, I think Viper will probably be happy that he doesn't have to play Druid again, because I wouldn't want to. Does mean he has his Rogue and his Warrior left over, and Jarla has got off to a good start with this Mage. As I mentioned before the match started, we have seen Mage 3-0 already today, so even with some of the questionable results or performance we've seen over the last week, it is doable. Someone did it today.
Yeah, I mean, I think the deck's fine. I think I literally called this out last week, where what I didn't want to see was people reacting to Mage this season in the same way they reacted to Rogue in the early weeks of last season, where Rogue was absolutely fine. It was a very strong Hearthstone deck. It had one bad week, and like half the GMs were just suddenly convinced that you couldn't bring it anymore, and its numbers went through the floor. Like, 1 week of performance is not enough to just write a deck off if it's, consistently putting in performances on ladder. If the matchup spread makes sense, then you can still bring the deck, regardless of whether you get a number of dry draws on the actual stream games on broadcast. And I think that's the case with Mage. I think it was a talking point last week that it did seem to underperform. But across the whole week, I think it was still just hanging around 50%, which is absolutely fine. And the deck's clearly still strong, right? Like, it's just capable of doing incredibly broken things. It just means that the metagame has moved on now to a point where maybe it's more debatable whether it's like core to the lineup, because the matchup spread has changed and things like Bomb Warrior and other decks that can compete and counter Bomb Warrior have come into play. which kind of the value tempo-based Mage and Rogue decks tend to struggle a bit more against, which has kind of flipped the dynamic a little bit. But I think Mage will be just fine.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because it is my backup plan. If Demon Hunter doesn't do well this week after you completely demolish me in the hot takes, saying Demon Hunter would be trash, I'll just reply, well, it's just one bad week, so you can't judge it. Maybe it's just going to be good in the future. And you'll be like, you can't use that excuse. And I'll just say, well, you did, so checkmate. But yeah, can't wait to see how Demon Hunter does overall. But Jarla, of course, is going to be on this Mage, and Viper, does get to play at Warrior again.
Yeah, and the Tempo Mage is a very interesting dynamic for Jarla, because it certainly doesn't seem like a natural fit in terms of playstyle, right? I think Jarla is regarded as a control player, and I think even though I have seen him play aggro very, very effectively, aggro where your turns potentially involve 20 or 30 actions in any given turn does not necessarily seem to be his bread and butter. He certainly has looked indecisive. There's a couple of debatable points where maybe the rope has punished him, but I think, on reflection, he might have just squeezed it all in and made some conscious decisions anyway. But he has looked potentially a little suspect on this deck, but his results have been very good, which seems to suggest at least that his overall macro game plan is very, very strong. And that's kind of the benefit, right? Like, if you spend 75 seconds every turn thinking about your overall game plan and not necessarily just getting through all your actions, there's a pretty good chance that your macro game plan is going to be better than other people.
And I think it's fair to point out as well that even if we talk about a player not looking comfortable or confident or or experienced with a deck, it doesn't mean you can't play it well, right? Nope. Like you can be not comfortable with a list and still play well and win. Right? That's completely possible. So it's by no means any form of slight. It's more of an observation on just how the huge differences in the way players execute these sort of fast decision-making decks, which is pretty cool to watch. But Viper, not having any of the problems we saw from Casey a little bit earlier on. He just has access to his weapons pretty early in the game, which means this is going to be, I think, all the questions are going to be asked of Jarla if he can put on enough pressure and make these weapon swings kind of awkward.
Yeah, but I would kind of flip that argument, as you mentioned, towards the latter half of your sentence there, which I think the problem we saw in the matchup against Casey before is that there was no early pressure from the Mage. So there was really no solution to the problem of ending the game in the late game. Whereas here, Jarla looks like he's off to a faster start. So sure, Viper can giddy up these weapons and start swinging face, but at least Jarla is going to be presenting some threats every turn that need answers. And that way, he might be able to get some consistent damage through to face himself, and you find himself a win condition with a Giant sticking or a Cyclone out or an Evocation out.
Yeah, and this is where it gets tricky, isn't it? Because, as you mentioned, like Jarla kind of has all the tools here, right? Like, it's just, I feel like the second you misstep is the second Warrior's just going to get hold of this game and end it. So this is where you can see now Jarla's not even touching the mouse, or wasn't at least. And he's just sat thinking and staring at the game. And his turn is ticking away. He's going to have to make some kind of decision soon, but it is tough. I don't even know the right way to go. I don't think assuming Shambhala will live through this is the correct path. But then what is it? Just these studies in a pass? Is it coin into Raz? I feel like I should rhyme one more time.
So yeah, Shambhala is a pretty interesting card in the matchup. Like, you can actually play it on 3 most of the time if your hand supports that, if you're able to pay it off on the following turn. Because actually, like, how do they kill it if you just drop it in the early game? The options actually just aren't there. Now there is Krastenov available, which is a little bit different to be able to solve the problem. But if you play it early enough, there really is no answer available from Bomb Warrior. So it's something that you can take advantage of. And yet, just to the point I made earlier, like, I'm not making this up, right? Jarla was still indecisive right as that rope hit at the end. I'm not, like, he reached for coin, he reached for Sorcerer's Apprentice, I think, towards the end. Very unsure about whether he wanted to get immediate value out of the Shambhala or whether he's going to risk it sticking there for a turn.
And I do think so. Sorry, I just love that it's just weapon face. it's just almost a given. But the problem is as well, although there are limited ways, there are options, right? Because there's Blade Storms, and also Viper is playing a Coerce in his list, which means there is potential spell removal. So, I don't know. To sum it up, decisions are pretty tough, and if you mess up, you might well lose. Here, though, Jarla does get to go off the Shenvala, did live, so the payoff is there. But was Viper okay with leaving it alive because he has that brawl?
I mean, to an extent, yes. Like, he's not going to panic because he has that brawl. But at the same time, that's a brawl that he's not going to have anymore at the end of this turn, which is very, very relevant when it then comes down to, you know, Mana Giant Conjurer's calling later on in the game. Well, you were saying about brawl.
Yeah, I mean, if there's ever a turn for Counterspell...
It's got to be Counterspell.
We saw something a little bit earlier, and it wasn't quite the same because the matchup was versus Druid, but RDU got a generated counterspell going straight into, like, the clear turn, or in Druid's sake, it was the Guardian Animal's turn, and that just ended the game. It was similar-ish to this... Oh! Okay, it was similar-ish to this position, but the upgrade off the top means Viper could test for it. The game could have just ended, and Jarla could have just gone 2-0 then. It was not to be.
Wow, and the 1-1 lives. Absolute premium outcome there for Viper. I would suggest Jarla just keep on going here, honestly.
I mean...
8-8. Yep,
he also... Yeah, I was going to say, if you just saw that, like, the test for Counterspell off the top happened into a brawl, are you really expecting there to be much more after that, right?
Right.
I like this a lot. Another secret as well for Viper to think about.
I wonder.
Viper now has considerations for Counterspell again, which is not obvious. I guess Corsair Cash, limited value for him right now because all weapons are either used or in hand. Ankar's gone. Double Wrench Caliber in hand, so if he does want to test Counterspell, he will do it with the Corsair Cash. Does so. Gets the bad news that he just spent 2 mana on nothing that turn.
And it does limit the rest of his turn. Not that he particularly had overly great options for that 2 mana anyway, but even if you could just say that that isn't a hero power, right? That's significant, especially with Mage that doesn't often have access to tons of burn from hand, right? Every point of damage is actually very important. So, Viper was correct to test it, but that's the gain Jarla has got from the mystery secret. It's just 13 damage.
Yep, potentially more than that with the arcane missiles inside the spell wing, with Raz following that up. That is a bomb draw, though.
Yeah, lab partner Raz missiles.
Oh no, the second bomb draw is brutal. Weapon currently at 5 attack for Viper.
So, no matter what, I do feel like Jarla has to play Magic Trick this turn, right? I do like this, though. Boom!
Excellent.
8 to face. That happens every day of the week. Next. Magic Trick, having the potential for Frostbolt, is worth a cast, I think, right now.
Agreed.
And then that should happen, because then that changes the rest of your turn, depending on what the options are, right?
Agreed. I really like the mirror entity here as well, because I think the secrets have been causing Viper a lot of distress on his turns. I think that's been fairly clear so far.
Works against me.
Kind of into trading the Spellwing and just ripping 2 arcane missiles.
I wouldn't hate it.
Oh, he doesn't need to trade it. Right. I completely forgot about the skipper. So this is 5 damage twice. Face for 10 total when there was
lethal.
12 on board.
Yeah.
It could have been.
Does it like you to go for the secret as well, from the looks of things, just the turn has to end quickly.
Yep.
Gets the 6/6 as well. This is looking fantastic. What does Viper do? I think he was relying on that Deathwing, and we're going to see that that is not going to pay off.
Yeah, more so, he's going to be relying on these bombs.
So swing to face happens, right? Because it's
Yes.
no matter what, if it's barrier, it still requires 2 bombs. If he doesn't swing, it requires 2 bombs. If he does swing and it's not barrier, it requires 1 bomb. So it is always worth the payoff.
Yeah, I mean, he can swing into one of the minions there. It's still then only 1 bomb. No, it's 2. Yeah, no. You're right. And the bomb is dodged.
Wow.
Which means Jarla is going to get himself over the line. Viper with a big shake of the head. And even then, like, you saw the difference it can make just to have a bit of early pressure in the matchup, right? That's what was missing in those matchups against Casey. Because we even saw a couple of fortunate outcomes for Viper there, where he ripped the upgrade off the top to break the counterspell,
Right.
which you can argue is lucky for Jarla to have generated in the first place, because it's not like he plays a counterspell in his deck. It came randomly off the Mana Cyclone. But the big difference is, even though everything else about that game was very similar, and you could argue better for Viper, in that he got the weapon early, buffed it up early, started swinging it early, the fact that he didn't have control of the board early meant that Jarla was always going to have outs. It was always going to be a battle of outs, where it was bomb outs versus lethal outs from Jarla's side of the board, because he was able to get a grip on the board state nice and early on.
Right. Yeah, it was a super close game, honestly. You saw that, even just 1 bomb away from a good time there for Viper. But I do just want to say, it is nice to see Jarla sometimes respond like that, because he is I would say he's one of the most stoic players when he's actually in game, right? On camera. But
Indeed.
Afterwards, I think you just see the, okay, 2-0. Let's move on, because that one was definitely close. 1 bomb away, and he's looking at an equal match, and maybe a fair few more games to come up after that. We're going 2-0 up, looking pretty fantastic to go into top 4 on Sunday. Is Jarla on the bottom? Already getting off to a quick start with that studies. And against Rogue, I actually really like the mana reservoir. Does Rogue ever want to kill that thing?
Yeah, we saw this skill. We saw this exact dynamic play out beforehand. It just so happened that Viper absolutely ended up monstering that game, and ended up with about 20 damages worth of minions on board that he was able to trade into the mana reservoir in that particular matchup. But yeah, I think the point stands. I do think it's very sticky. Do you think generally this aggressive build of Rogue does not want to be sinking that much damage into a minion?
Spy Mistress start does open up some good options here for Viper, though. You always want that stealth minion early on in the game.
Ugh. This hand is not doing it. It's not doing it, Raven.
Well, that's what Secret Passage is for, right? So
No. The other hand. The one that has 2 mana giants in it? Yeah. That's a problem.
That's only 1 evocation away. Just evocation and a Sorcerer's Apprentice, it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit slow, though. I was going to say that, although this hand, arguably not great this turn for Viper, I think the options are there, right? This might even be a build your own weapon game from Viper, looking at it so far.
Okay. Internal monologue intensifies. Jarla chooses to ping to protect the reservoir on board, as opposed to playing Arcane Intellect.
Viper
And
with
the little nod
Volpera.
comes out.
Gonna respect. Clear it off. And honestly, 4 turns in, being on 30 health, things could be worse for Jarla, but things could be a lot better.
They could be significantly better, yes.
Get in there, get in
It's
there.
a combination of 2 cards that certainly gives Jarla a window into doing something this game. But it is just a window. Never mind, he died.
Sorry, Ray of Frost off the top will solve this.
Yeah, devolving missiles as well. Might have something to say about it. But suddenly, the non-existent pressure just turned into an enormous amount of pressure, because don't forget that Volpera is still there as well, which is a persistent effect. Gotta go.
And
Gotta find an answer now.
Yeah. These giants have to hit the board this turn.
Ugh.
Ouch. Yep, just wants to use the cheapest one, being 0, to go off with the Mind Cyclone a bit better. Much better than just playing a secret and hoping something happens. Which it just
It's also weirdly the same play as last game as well, where he can now follow up with a Mana Giant next turn to draw 3 spells from his deck, one of which may be the Devolving Missiles that he plays naturally.
True. Also, honestly, Flame Ward and Vaporize aren't the worst cards for him right now. They're not good, but they're not the worst. I mean, you could have got like Flame Strike and Box, right? You know, I'd just say like the cards are playable and achieve something. Just like
Okay.
Missiles does.
Okay.
So devolving, reassess, potential Flame Ward could clean up the board.
Yeah, it's still an awful lot of damage that you're going to take, though. Yeah, especially now
No,
that
the
the
synergy!
Volpira's stuck. Synergy's kind of real, actually. That's a golden hyena as well. That's going to pop off so much harder when a beast dies. Jarla looks dead, Raven.
Yes, it does not look great, does it? He is technically alive. Does he just have to Flame Ward Ping and then hope he can just, I don't know, do something next?
It's just still so much damage, though.
It is.
The fact that the weapon and the highest attack minion just both still get to attack, it's just such an enormous amount of damage.
So what you're saying is he should have conjured the hyena to get a Doomsday.
What? I'll get a Doomsday, right, okay. Yeah. This needs to be the driest passage you have ever seen in your life for Viper to not be in a secure position this game.
And that is not. Those are literally a combination of the best cards I've ever seen. And I think Viper has ever seen as well.
Yep, little bit inelegant in terms of the weapon attack that Viper wants to use, but can't use, because now he's playing additional minions without having tested for Flame Ward.
Yeah, he can just throw these away though, right? It makes his deck thinner.
Sure,
So then-
yes.
These aren't winning him the game, the Dread Corsairs, if he draws them, right? So you could just say, like, discard 2 Dread Corsairs, deal a ton of damage.
Yeah.
Now he gets to equip the weapon as well. And look at that, the Volpero Toxablade, the Eviscerate, it's all just adding up to a victory for Viper here, unless Jarla can perform a miracle right now. I don't even know what that would look like.
I'm not seeing it. It needed to be Evocation a few turns ago. If the Evocation had lined up with the Sorcerer's Apprentice, maybe these Giants would be in play, maybe there'd be a race. If it wasn't just a collection of nonsense secrets that came off, and it was, I don't know, Frost Nova, Blizzard, something that actually impact the board immediately.
Even like a Frostbolt, also, you know, just a... I don't know. I think the key thing here is Jarla needed to land at least one Giant for something to happen this game, because maybe Viper respects the Giant and has to trade, which then makes the game go longer and so on. But regardless of what happened, Jarla just needed to land a Giant, and now it's too little too late.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying like Frost Nova over any like individual like spot removal is maybe if these Giants were like 1 or 2 points cheaper, and you could like have a Frost Nova double Giant turn around now and actually be looking at some kind of win condition.
Victory is yours.
And that is going to be the game. Yep.
That was a 3-drop.
Yeah, that was also confusing. I was going to bring it up, well, 5 minutes anyway. But Viper is going to take a victory there. And that means the series does continue. Jarla is not going to sweep, so he's not going to take, I would say, full revenge from earlier on. But it does mean Jarla, it does have the choice between his Druid or Priest to go up against Rogue. And our experience, at least, looking at these rogues, so I feel like there's about 100 different rogue lists. What is the stronger deck for Jarla? Does Jarla have anything that should just shut down this rogue hard and end this series? Or is it going to be a little bit of a closer cut thing?
It has to be the Priest, right? That's in the stronger position. We saw it in the previous series where Viper just ran him over with Rogue. But in that game, Jarla did get his hands on a secret passage and then had 5 chances to find Ooze that would have completely shut down the game. And I think if you look at APAC, we saw in APAC basically a similar situation where the Priest really just toyed with the Rogue for 7, 8, 9 turns, and it was not even remotely close. So this double weapon destruction build that we've been seeing, that's primarily, I think, being targeted at those warriors, should be able to put in some work in this matchup. And I don't think what we saw in their series opener is really representative of maybe what the average matchup versus Rogue looks like there. But Viper is playing a build that doesn't necessarily just need to smack you in the face for 30 with weapons. He is paying a lot more attention to his board state than that would suggest. So, even if the weapons do go down, there's still some kind of mid-rangey minions that can come into play, although a big one of them is the Steel Dancer, which if the weapon gets destroyed, suddenly your Steel Dancer gets a lot worse as well. And with that all rounded off, Jarla is not going to need to go digging in his passage for an Ooze this time, because he just has it opening hand, ready to go. So again, we're going to perhaps see one of those dynamics of how Jarla is going to have to space out his weapon destruction against multiple weapons from his opponent. But I think this matchup, probably a little bit of a simpler equation than the Bomb Warrior we saw previously.
What is a loon's will?
Debate here already for Jarla as to whether he wants to tempo Zephyrus even. He doesn't have the Raised Dead follow-up, which does suggest he should probably hold on to it a little bit more, but he can just take care of this board state immediately.
One thing that's pretty interesting as well is just because of Viper's build, with a little bit more of a minion focus than, say, the raw weapon builds we've been seeing, even the Broom in this Priest list can get some work done, right, to help clear up some board. So
yeah, no, that's very true.
It's gonna be a tough one, and Jarla. Come on, Jarla. I know it's a bit of a trademark. But come on, right? We're waiting for the rope, going for the arrow power. He probably was thinking about the Zephyrus, but I don't even know what the payoff for Zephyrus this turn would be.
You could, I don't know, coin Zephyrus Whirlwind. I don't know.
A little something I whipped up.
Oh, well, there's the Broom as well, so there is options to at least start thinking about trades.
Yeah. Might just be Zeph Smite, though.
So on that
Smite
note,
gamer?
What if Wave is just enough? Okay, Wave probably isn't enough because it's a Vulpera, so at worst, hero power hit face is going to hurt.
Yeah.
I just think, can the Zeph do more? And I'm the first person to shout at people for being too greedy with Zephyrus, but yeah, I think because it's exactly Vulpera, it's probably just worth the hard removal, right?
Okay, new plan. What if you took... So I was waiting to see what you got offered before suggesting this. But yeah, exactly. I was going to say, what if you just take the Twilight Drake and make this play? Then consider taking the Holy Smite and making this play, which might be even better. But that is pro-level Zephyrus, is that you trick it into giving you a card that you don't actually want that turn and then do something completely different when you want the card for a completely different turn somewhere down the line. And so I think there were actually a lot of pretty interesting lines available there with the Zephyrus.
I do think going Cobalt looks straightforward here, and sometimes straightforward's the best. I was going to raise... Well, this is maybe even a problem with Mind Render, is that I feel like you almost have to discuss it every turn if you're actually going to go super in depth.
Yeah, I
because
know.
there's just never a turn that you can sit there and go, oh, you never play it this turn. But not quite then because of some of the key cards, like Viper could have just thrown the use away, right? And so on, so on. So I do think I like this Cobalt here, especially because, the spells are so good in Priest that you're often going to get something at least half decent. And most importantly, it puts a body on the board that Viper has to consider purely because of Apotheosis.
Right.
And you're seeing the respect again, right? This might be where the smite comes in handy, just to kill this other Volpera. So it kind of did the thing it was going to do anyway, but in a much better order.
Yes. Yeah, this second Volpera was going to look a lot more difficult to kill if the Jarla had tried to do it the other way around.
Right.
Ugh. Probably just big ol'. Yep. I'm not really seeing anything else. Racking my brain for something more exciting to do this turn than Holy Smite the minion.
Is this the turn to wave and hero power?
Wave and hero power? To what end? What are you trying
just
to
not
achieve?
take 6.
Okay.
Because the
Sure.
problem is, like, wave. Are you really going to wait for Viper to make a full board or a big board of minions before you don't take damage? You know what I mean? Whereas now he has the mana to use. He doesn't have an acolyte in hand, so it's not like he's going to lose that ability in the near future. I guess this is fine as well. I think most importantly is just utilizing the mana, but I don't know. It's still getting hit pretty hard.
Yeah, so that was exactly going to be my counter argument, is that he already has a Radiance in his hand that he's not getting full value out of right there. Like, he missed one healing. It ended up being off the hero power, but just imagine it happening the other way around, and he didn't get full value off of his Radiance. So I don't think you should be super concerned with, like, Wave of Apathy to reduce damage when you're already above 30 just based on the contents of your hand. And it just keeps getting better and better, right? Like, sure, he tanks this. It's a decent amount of damage.
Right.
But the Wave of Apathy has improved from the previous turn. It
has. The worry that I think I would feel is by the time you use the Wave of Apathy, are you getting hit for 8 by a weapon potentially? I know there's the use there, but there's still a chance you get hit for that initial big burst of damage. But I guess Jarla does have his bases covered here. I think this turn was potentially the scary one because he has nothing concrete to do on this turn. Whereas next turn he can look at Soul or Galakron, whatever's needed, and then build on that. So
yeah,
that
as
wave
expected.
Yeah,
I think milking it one more turn is going to pay out pretty well for him here. And also, the other thing is that it, like, bridges the gap, right, between the period of the game where he's not doing things and now the period of the game where he is very much doing things, right? Like, this turn was his last turn where his hand wasn't really unlocked and doing powerful things. So I think doing it here is actually probably the optimal turn to land.
And also as well, he has, when it flicks back, he has Soul Mirror to just answer the majority of the board, so he does have a way to clear this. So, yeah, I like this a lot. Viper.
I wonder.
Just running a little bit dry here.
It's again like that weird pan out where Jarla's just had the weapon destruction ready to go, but his opponent just hasn't presented a good enough weapon for him to want to interact with it.
What if he just deadly poisons and Krasinov here? Because that's going to get I think I like this, because that's going to get destroyed, right? But he still has his weapons available. It costs him a deadly poison, but although you could argue it cost him the Krasinov, if he just passes, then that's just worse, right? It's like, I'm saving this Krasinov for the perfect moment, and then he dies with it in hand. It is the fear, isn't it? And even if this is a Soul Mirror, it is a pretty low impact Soul Mirror for Viper. Like, Jarla doesn't retain any minions.
Yeah, this is looking very, very clean. Hard to imagine Viper putting something together that gets him over the line here. Worgen Infiltrator is definitely not it.
Okay. This is how I want this day to end, Sol. Worgen Infiltrator, Galakron kills the Worgen Infiltrator. That is the ultimate way to end a game of Hearthstone.
Into concede.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Would Jarla playing Mind Render be the equivalent of a Mercy? Just allow Viper, like, you can have a chance.
It's a weird spot, right? Like, Jarla actually just now has nothing to do this turn. Viper is building up damage in hand.
Tempo Kaj? Hero power?
Yeah, sure.
Because the problem is, joking aside, this is a turn where you don't discuss Mind Render because you don't want to give Viper a Galakron right now, which gives him a pretty good option. Also, as well, though, I was joking about the Worgen Infiltrator. Viper doing a good job, honestly, of keeping it because if he draws Sage off the top, then that again activates his game and gives him options or outs or access to damage. So it is, you know, I joked about the Worgen into the Galakron, but holding it 100% correct.
Jarla just says, hey, you know what? I'm going to play this game from 20. Okay.
I would argue that the hero power, potentially getting him taunts or minions that heal and so on, probably does more for him than passing a turn or playing a 3-3, you know?
That's the question, though, right? Like, I was going to say that genuinely, this turn where Jarla might have ended up doing nothing was genuinely really hard. Like, if he'd have just roped it and passed and done nothing, that would have been the hardest rope pass do nothing decision you've ever seen in your life.
A cruel fate awaits you in the ashes.
Well, those are playable.
That's playable. Viper's got to know that the weapon destruction is there by now, though, right?
Yep.
The amount of cards that are just stacked up over on the left-hand side of Jarla's hand that aren't being played, how many of them cannot be weapon destruction at this point?
Yeah, and I think he has to just, like, it's going to sound weird, but happily not care.
Yeah, because just play everything else.
Right, okay.
Yeah, I love this. I think, like, Viper's absolutely nailed this turn. This was an incredibly clean passage from Viper.
Yeah. But this next turn from Jarla is going to nail it because Breath of the Infinite is going to clean up so much of this.
Yeah, just go Plague as well. Take care of the 3/3s as well.
Yeah, sure. And it also just doesn't give Viper another 3/1 stealth to play.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, you know what? I kind of switched off and didn't realize it was 9 mana exactly. I thought for some reason Jarla's going to 8.
And this is the problem you get into with self-sharpening swords specifically. Like in this spot, opponent at 14. Okay, the second one is an extremely big deal. I was going to say, this spot, opponent at 14, eviscerate in hand, stealth minion in play. Like, getting one swing of a big weapon and then getting it oozed, like, you'd be fine with that a lot of the time. But self-sharpening sword is so slow to start up. That was so many S's. Oh my god. It runs into trouble now when you just get it oozed because all you've done is just poked for one, right?
Yeah, that's the problem. It's such an interesting weapon to use because it gets better the more you use it, as opposed to most other weapons that, like, like quite obviously degrade because their durability is low. So it's a tough one because it's that point of after seeing 2 deadly poisons, Jarla just doesn't play ooze this turn, right? Is he actually going to play ooze? Okay. I would have thought he maybe could have held off for one more turn and just take 2.
Why would you? To what benefit?
In the shadows.
Yeah, I'm probably going a bit caster vision there. I was probably thinking whether he plays Mind Render this turn, but that also gives Viper options. So when do you play Mind Render? It is ridiculous.
Give me one rule that states when you play Mind Reader in every matchup.
Teach me Mind Render.
Yeah.
Teach me Mind Render. Okay, well, I do feel like Jarla has to start with a hero power here. There are some very good options coming out. There are some very bad ones as well, though. You could also Sethic and then Death, technically.
Yep, that seems awful. What else you got?
I mean, the turn seems awful, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
You can fully attack in and breath at the end if if there's literally nothing else good to do, which does clear the 3/1. Oh, okay. Okay, so what about attacks, breath, and then Psycho Pump? That is now available.
Yeah, looks about right.
Yeah. The 3/1 just has to die. It's worth the sacrifice of your own minions, right?
Yeah. It sucks that he just didn't hit a dragon off the draw or generate a dragon off the hero power to be able to really represent a counter lethal himself, because that's a much bigger deal than you might expect, right? Like having to actually represent lethal himself.
Oh, the rush on the Surger can kill off the use.
Yeah, you give it to the Surger, right? And then you just trade it into the use. And it's a 4/6.
And also, weapon synergy.
I know. It's crazy, right?
Is Viper really thinking about a potential sap on
many
what?
options.
Or is he working out whether he wants to trade and defend the
Right.
minion, since the 2 damage only gets better?
Yeah. So remember, right now this broomstick has double rush function,
Right.
which is a fair bit of removal power.
So many options.
So the 3/1 might have to be taken care of in some world to protect the 4/6, but how important is that compared to just throwing out your sap and going face? Yeah, I mean, I just love this.
This is good, because when you actually think about it, I don't think there's actually any hard punish minion from Psycho Pump. Oh!
No.
Easiest raise dead Zephyrus of Jarla's life.
Does it do enough?
I mean, it can break a weapon, it can heal.
It can't do
Can
both those things.
Okay, it can make a Tyrion, take that.
Okay. Okay, sure. Psycho
Although
Pump
this
again.
is good as well.
Trade is technically alive.
The end begins.
Amazing.
What is this?
You've got to drop the Kaj, right? Kaj has to come down. Max tempo, surely. The problem is, this 3+4 from the weapon is not even representing lethal currently for Viper. Secret Passage number 2 off the top. I believe there is just an Eviscerate remaining in his deck.
It just...
The Backstab enrages the Spiteful Smith, plus the Eviscerate.
Oh my, oh
For
my.
the game-ending damage. Without the Backstab, that was not lethal. Insane.
What a game. There were, again, just so many different options there. Even if you wind it all the way back to the Zephyrus, which, don't get me wrong, I think what Jarla did with the Zephyrus and the Broom was very good, but there were options like, did you need to Zephyrus? Probably, looking at it. But what if that was held on? What if he'd pressed hero power a few more times? What if he just didn't equip Galakron, right? And again, I am not saying any of these plays were wrong by any means, but the fact that there were so many options there, even when you look at Viper taking the choice of not going for the weapon and just throwing out all the minions instead, from the passage and everything. It all looked very solid. But again, just a game of so many small decisions really adding up to just such a close ending there. It was huge. And we're all going to go to that last game now. Wow. What a series.
Yeah, night and day from what we saw in the opener, which was Viper 3-0ing with Rogue, but we might be in a position where Viper is just going to 3-0 with Rogue, despite it being a completely different way around of doing it. This time, the reverse sweep coming through, and Jarla up against it here does have double bloom in the opener, though, going up against an aggro deck, and I do, I've talked before about my love of Overgrowth and my dislike of the Lightning Bloom in the opening hand. I do think the more aggressive the deck you're playing against, the more that dynamic changes, the better Lightning Bloom does get. So fully respect holding on to one here. Oh, that's the juice right there, Raven.
Yeah, that is one really big Bog Beam, actually.
Yeah. Oh, the Bog Beam. That is the star of this hand right now.
It's huge.
Any reason to go in now? Skip turn 2. You would allow your opponent a free attack, essentially, with the Worgen, safe in the knowledge that you couldn't hero power it.
Well, also, your opponent's not going to attack with the Worgen most of the time, right? Is that fair to assume?
What? Like
maybe they want it.
If you just pass here, you mean?
I mean, is the Rogue more likely to not swing the Worgen because of the stealth?
Sure.
Right. It's not like it's always 2 damage. Is my point. So I think I do like this. Yeah.
I do like this curve. It appeals to me. Next turn, so he has 1, and he can essentially do nothing. No, it's not right. He does have 2.
No, hero
next
power.
turn, right? Yeah, he can hero power next turn. Yeah. And then from there, he curves into Teacher's Pet. So yeah, I just completely miscounted. There is very little debate here. This curve is just right. I just completely blanked on the fact that he'd have 2 this turn and not 1 for some reason. Yeah, this is just right.
Now I mean, you can see, right? It looks pretty straightforward. There's the turn 5 play. Even, especially against Rogue, Ghidra into just a hard cast Bog Beam is fine.
Yes.
a lot of the time, right? And then straight into that overflow looks pretty good. But on the other side of the board, doesn't look too bad either, having that self-sharpening sword. And also just the secret passage available once again. So at any point, Viper can just refill his hand and have another roll of the dice just to see if he can make anything strong onto the board. But Deadly Poison and the Dread Corsair might be within the near future instead.
And Viper says, enough of this nonsense holding on to my stealth minions. Time to get some freaking damage through. I just played self-sharpening sword. This is just lethal. My minions are going face.
So now, funnily enough, is Ghidra ever the play now?
So many contradictions.
It's a good question.
Because it stops a lot of damage, whereas the Teacher's Pet doesn't necessarily do the same. And they can still Nature Studies, or Nature Studies next turn. You could Ghidra Hero Power this turn. Maybe make 1 trade. I don't know. There was actually a lot of options there. And I'm not sure which one I like the best.
Yeah, that was actually much tougher than I first gave it credit for, because my brain is just screaming at me that this is the curve, right? You just play your 5 on 5, and then 3 + 3 makes 6, and you have a big Ghidra that can clear up the board. But it's the potential of, backstab Deadly Poison, backstab Volpira, sap plus tempoing onto the board with more minions. There's so many ways that this can end up being a lot of damage that you're taking this turn, even through one of the most resilient mid-game taunts that we have right now. Definitely worth thinking about, and Jarla certainly did, as he is wont to do.
And yet again, very interesting turn here. Viper can just play out his whole hand minus the passage. But it's just how he quite lines that up, I guess, is the question.
Yeah.
And if he wants to replay the 3-1 stealth this turn, which means he doesn't go for the Eviscerate.
Right. Oh, no, 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 no. You hate to see that if you're a Jarla fan.
Blood and plunder.
Still, the curve is working out just fine. Hydra
Right.
Bog Beam now is very nice.
Yep, and this is the payoff of not going for the Gidra last turn. Although you did take some damage, there's a arguably stronger Gidra turn this time because you do get that Bog Beam as well to just make it a little bit more resilient.
How curious.
Jarla flirting with his nature studies this turn, but I don't think there's any reason to play the nature studies this turn. Obviously,
No.
you make your Gidra slightly smaller by doing it that way because you're discounting the spell that you're going to end up popping off with. And even if you were going to do it in a way where, like, you
Contradictions.
just Gidra and you save the discount for the following turn, you're just playing Overflow next turn anyway, right? So that discount doesn't really end
Right,
up being
right.
relevant.
And also, what are you getting that's better than Gidra Bog Beam this turn? Like nothing, right?
Gidra
Realistically,
Bees?
is that? I guess.
It is better. It's definitely
What are the odds?
better. Not great.
Yeah, I think I like Jarla thinking about it, but I do like this because nature studies can be so much better, like after the overflow, right?
Yeah.
I do love this turn, just because it's like, oh, I was gonna play a few cards this turn, but now my Van Cleef's gone. Oh, okay. Wait, is it actually Volpera? It is, right? Volpera Spy Mistress trade.
I like it.
At first, I really looked at that steel answer, but you just cannot leave a 4/7 Wind Fury up.
No, even if Jarla feels the need to clear, which he probably will, a 4/7 Wind Fury kills a Steel Dancer and a 5-drop a lot of the time. Steel Dancer and a 6-drop, though, which it actually is, I guess. Maybe a bit more difficult.
But for me, going into exactly turn 7, the trade overflow nightmares might be too much to handle.
I mean, or just the Guardian Animals smack your board, go face with my Wind Fury.
Very
guy.
true.
Yeah.
Or the Kel'Thas. Oh no, never mind.
No. Wind it back.
May I have this dance?
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, I guess this is the other option that we didn't really talk about.
Yep.
Generate board and respect the
It's
minion.
Yeah, it's just interesting because I feel like 1 second Jarla Viper is valuing board minions like super high, and then the next second it feels like less so. Across his matches,
Mm.
and that's obviously potentially matchup situation dependent. But yeah, I thought you would want to stick that 3/1 because there's not really a good way for Jarla to kill it up, or they would have been dead by now.
Right.
He isn't playing the Malaguts list, so there's no Moonfires knocking around or anything like that.
Nope.
There's just 1 crystal power, and then nature studies equals X, right?
Yeah, we haven't really talked that much about Jarla's list exactly. It's a very weird menagerie list where he has double Mount Seller, he has Ysera Unleashed, but then he also has 1 copy of Survival of the Fittest just thrown in there at the top end, which is kind of cool, honestly, because that's what your deck does with double Mount Seller and Ysera and double Guardian Animals is make a lot of boards really, really quickly. So the idea of just threatening your opponent, if nothing else, like sure, you might not draw the 1 Survival of the Fittest that often, but your opponents know it's there in your deck list. So every time you make a board, they have to be terrible.
It's an extension of the Savage Raw fear, isn't it? But in a much different, sort of more powerful, impactful way. And there are some Druids, I believe, submitted this week that were playing 1 Savage Raw in the list, and that
Oh, really?
It's a very
Missed that.
Yeah. I can't remember who, so I'm going to be annoyed. I'm sure someone will tell me in a bit, but I'm sure there's someone playing Savage Raw, and it's just that fear factor, right? Because then, as you said, the deck makes tons of stuff. Like if you can play around Savage Raw when your opponents could lethal you with it, you probably do. And Survival of the Fittest has the benefit of just adding all that health on board as well.
It's go time.
Yep. All the tools are there, aren't they? The double Iron Bark. Innovate, Crystal Power. These are all cards I just like in Druid, and it hurts me whenever I see them cut.
Oh, that's nutty. You kill your own Salet's Pride, it draws you the broom. Is there a way to do it?
Yeah, you can just Crystal Power it. I love this from Jarla. I mean, it's not the most, 8 million IQ play in the world, but you do have to see it, and it's in a pretty high-pressure game, right? If Jarla wins this, he's through to Sunday.
Yeah. I mean, what that tells me is that Jarla has generated at least one Salet's Pride before while playing this deck. Because the first time it happens, you're like, oh, great, Salet's Pride. And then it draws you the broom. And then you realize for the first time, and then you never forget after that point that Salet's Pride is actually the nuts off Mount Seller now.
Right. Look at the difference a broom makes. It's night and day, isn't it? It turns a good deck or even a good set of turn with the Mount Seller into game winning, right? Just insta game winning, because a lot of the time the board building aspect of Mount Seller is powerful in itself, but if you give everything rush, jeez.
Jarla's still not happy. His board is going. 6 more to the face. Edwin Van Cleef. This game is not over, Raven. This game is over, Raven.
I was going to say, there are a good amount of draws that help, and all Jarla has to do is get one taunt and any other beast, which... Okay.
There's no taunts left. He had double Twilight Runner Lake Thresher left, so he was either going to have a giant cleaver stick on the board, or he was going to draw 4 cards. Like, take your pick.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot he only plays one Teacher's Pet. It's hard keeping track of the beast formats, because I feel like almost every player has a different combination of them, because a lot of players were only playing one Lake Thresher at one point as well.
Right.
So now, with one passage being used by Viper, I think so far, Jarla's top priority, anything to not die, because he can outlast this as long as Viper doesn't draw another passage.
Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of don't die left in his deck, to be perfectly honest. He has an Overflow, which will kind of kill him because he's almost fatiguing. And he has double Innovate, Lightning Bloom, double Wild Growth, Overgrowth, and a remaining Guardian Animals that does nothing. That's his deck. That is his deck. There is nothing in there. So he needs a clean Ysera turn or a clean Mount Seller turn so he can just dominate the board right now.
Or what about a double 5-drop turn into a potential survival? Is that better? With what he's got, right? Because at Mount Seller, it's Mount Seller and a spell right now.
I mean, what he needed was his opponent not to draw the absolute biggest thing in his deck off the top that turn. That makes life very difficult for Jarla.
But if Viper swings, I would almost say that is a benefit as well. Plays the minion. Obviously, you would have liked to move in with the Thresher to help clear up some of this board.
Mm-hmm.
The big threat of the weapon is just gone for now, right? And that is 3 summons from a Mount Seller this turn.
It is, and 3 of the cards remaining off the draw are just more minions. Innovate, Lightning Bloom. And if any portion of this board sticks, that Survival of the Fittest is going to be an ender.
Oh! One more and you've got the card.
It's fine, we're just going to get these 3/1/1 rabbits, and then next turn we're going to evolve them all with Survival of the Fittest into massive minions that kill our opponent.
Look, I braced myself then, I'm not going to lie. Thought you were going to go for a Battlegrounds joke.
Nope.
It's like, I've heard it. Oh, okay, cutting class from Viper. Not what he's after, but card draw is better than a dead draw.
No one's better than dead draw, Raven.
I mean, that didn't work out too terribly. What the?
This is exactly what I was talking about before, though, about the way the deck's built. like, I don't think Viper necessarily has the luxury to be able to be trading too much, but if he doesn't, he knows his opponent is playing survival of the fittest, and that just ends it.
But does it, though?
I mean, I guess
What if he
Safeguard
goes
is a
all
hell of a card
face?
in his position.
What if he goes all face,
Yeah.
bop a rabbit with his dagger, play the
Mhm.
Spy Mistress, so that's generally 6 damage guaranteed next turn, and then if Jarla has to field to full trade, then maybe he gets enough time. Oh, it's really close. I don't even know if that's doable.
Yeah, that Porky Boy is kind of a problem as well, right? The fact he has 2/3/1 stealths that he really wants to get damage out of, and there's
So
this
the
death
question
rattle
is,
going off.
Does he trade the Porcupine before he plays Survival?
Mm.
So otherwise it won't die, right?
I mean, does Survival even get played? Now Nature Studies got drawn.
These are all questions. Does Jarla win? Does Viper win? we could be here all night, so and we already kind of have at this point, but still.
There's no reason not to open the Nature Studies box, right?
No, I don't think so.
I would like 1 swipe, please, dealer. I would take 1 Gift of the Wild, please, dealer.
The Wild. As it be
I
called Gift of
definitely-
the Win.
Definitely was not thinking ambitious enough there. Swipe! Imagine wanting a swipe there, when you can just give all of your giant minions Taunt.
I think that, yep, bit of a nod and a side look from Viper. Don't blame him on that one. There is, I'm going to say, no way he can now win this game.
This is the point where my exhausted brain, after playing at Jarla's level for the entire day, would have just slammed that Gift of the Wild and then just stared up at my opponent and said, please don't make me think anymore about where I'd have to trade or go fate. Like, just concede. You're dead. Save me the hassle. This is agony. Playing this game's too hard.
A cruel fate awaits
Draw some
you in
cards,
the
though.
ashes.
I'd love to know what Viper's digging for right now.
We see these 8 cards he has remaining in his deck. 7 of them are saps. So he's in
And
business.
it costs 0.
They cost 0, yeah.
Oh wait, that's what he needed. Galacron. Yeah, that's 10 damage just on board, and that survival of the fittest just about makes up the rest. It was a long, hard-fought victory, but Jarla got there, taking the series 3-2 over Viper. Very, very close, and I will say this, we've talked about Jarla. I mean, one of the best records, if not the best record in Grandmasters, but he has also been involved in some of the nuttiest series I've watched for a long time, because even just that Priest game earlier on, the Priest versus Bomb Warrior, but both of his series, like, it's just been a slog, honestly, and fair play to him just for being able to keep control of things. And although it looked a little bit ropey at times, he did get the job done overall.
He did, yeah, and he's a joy to watch, honestly. We set him up at the beginning. He's played a seriously long day of Hearthstone, which is when you play at the pace and the level that he does. Genuinely, you know, I was kind of joking around at the end, but like seriously, that it takes a lot out of you to be engaged at that level over long periods of time, which honestly might be a big part of the reason why a player like Blaze has so much success in big Swiss tournaments right now. When you look at the Masters Tour and how he's qualified 2 weeks out of 2 going through Swiss, is that he just gets to preserve so much energy by playing in the way that he does. So the fact that Jarla, who expends about as much energy as probably anyone named Hunter Ace not to play this game, then it's even more impressive that he manages to put up the results that he does while you know, playing in the way that he does. It has to be so mentally draining and so mentally fatiguing over large periods of time.
Yeah, but as we take a look at that Group A there that we went through today, we've got Group B tomorrow, of course, but just another shout out to RDU, who's made it to another top 4 back-to-back now, so he's going to be looking at having his eyes on not that second place, but that first place this week, no doubt. But we are going to be done for the day. We've got Americas coming right up after this, so don't go anywhere. There's plenty more Hearthstone action coming up, but for now, we'll see you tomorrow when we take on Group B. We'll see you then.